Hello and welcome to another exciting Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be making trash. Let's get started. Okay, so we've got all of our rubbish pieces that we've modeled, we're set up, ready to go. So it's time to transition into geometry nodes and make giant rubbish piles using geometry nodes. So let's do it. So I'm going to take my little rubbish collection. I'm just going to untick it. That's just going to hide it. It doesn't it removes it from the scene, but it's still available in the scene for me to use for things like geometry nodes. Now I'm going to create a plane. So I'm going to go Shift A, Mesh Plane, and I'll just scale it up a little bit. So we're going to use geometry nodes. So I'm just going to switch over to the geometry nodes tab, which gives us this nice custom layout. It gives you the spreadsheet here, which all these, of course, you can get just from the drop downs. So I've pulled up the spreadsheet right here, which will give us the data for the different components of our geometry node system. It's really helpful to see what's going on. I'm going to click New right here in the geometry nodes window to create a new geometry node system. And we're going to name it Rubbish Pile. Now, the basic gist of this is that first we need to instance a bunch of points across this surface. Now, when I say instance, I mean we need to, well, I don't know what the technical definition is. It's like a copy of something that shares data. I hope I explained that correctly. If I didn't, let me know. Because comments help to generate algorithm love. And in YouTube land, that's all that matters. I should just say incorrect stuff all the time so that I infuriate people and cause them to leave lots of comments, and then my channel will become popular. So we've got our input, output. Now this is just basically saying, all right, the plane that this is applied to, it's bringing it in to the system. I can do stuff to this plane, and then it's piping it out with all the stuff we've done to it, which is nothing. And there it is, the result. So you're always seeing the final result of the geometry node system. All right, so what we need to do is we need to create a bunch of instanced points. So points are basically just particles. They're just like, it's an empty data point that's just sort of a location, a place in space. We can do stuff to it, and then we can instance geometry wherever those things are. So they're called points in geometry nodes. And the first node we want to use is if we type in points, distribute points on faces. So we can just drop this here, and you can see it just creates a bunch of different points across the surface. I'll just clear that camera and the light so it's not in the way here for a few. I can increase the density and stuff, and I'm just going to leave it kind of low at the for a minute here so it doesn't get too dense in case breaks Blender or something. Now, once I've done that, the next thing is I need to instance geometry where those points are located. So if I come over here, if you're not familiar, by the way, this is like the first time I'm using Blender 3.0 geometry nodes, so I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm pretending to know what I'm doing. It's how you make a tutorial. You get online, you pretend to know what you're doing. You talk like you're confident, and then you make big mistakes. And then everyone finds out you don't know what you're doing. You watch someone else's tutorial in the live stream. So the next node that we need is the instances on point node. And what that's going to do, it's going to generate instances where each of these points are. So we've created these data points. They're in the 3D space along the plane. Now we can instance something on them. So I'm going to come over here and type in instance, and I'm going to go instances on points, and we'll just drop this here. Okay, now nothing happens yet because we actually haven't told Blender what to instance on those points. You can see the instance input is just empty, so it's not going to generate anything. We're going to grab this collection, this rubbish collection. So we need to come here, go search, type in collection, and we're going to go for the collection info node. This gives us a little drop down. We can select the rubbish collection, and we can plug the geometry output into the instance input. So we're telling Blender, use this collection, all the geometry in this collection, and instance it randomly pick and instance it and put it where those points were. So now you can see that we don't get that result. We get actually the entire collection laid out in the exact same format. So you see if I grab one of these guys and move it off, they all stick with it. So it's instanced where the points are, but it's instanced the entire collection, the whole string in the exact same way that I've laid it out. So it's not quite what we want. What we want to do is a couple of things. First off, we have this option original and relative. This is basically telling Blender how to calculate the position of these things on the points based on the position of this plane that we've created that everything's on and the position of the original object in these collections. So if we go relative, they're going to be relative to the plane that they're on, right? So you say they all get a lot smaller here. They shrink right down, and it's doing it relative to the size of this plane. So we'll switch to relative, and then we want to separate the children, and we want to reset the children. This is going to separate the hierarchy, so it's not going to be instancing the entire collection. It's going to instance the individual components, and then resetting the children resets basically their position and their scale and their rotation. kind of zeroes them out. Same as applying, but it's non-destructive. It's kind of doing it in the flow of things. That way you can have your collection laid out like we do in a string, so we can easily see them all. But then we can just turn this off and use reset children and separate children, and it will, instance them all exactly where the point is. So it's just a convenience thing for us to work with. So anyways, now that we've instanced all these guys, they're now on this plane. Now I'm going to take the plane, and I actually want to, I want to apply my scale, because you see my scale is quite large. And watch what happens, it'll change. So we're going to come over here and hit F3, and we are going to type in apply, and we're going to apply all transforms to that. So now this is a scale of 1, and you can see what happens is that all these guys end up shrinking in size. That's because as we were scaling up that plane, it's going to affect everything as well, all these geometry nodes objects. I'm going to turn my density back down because it was a bit too crazy. All right, so now you can see what's happening is it's actually taking everything that's in that rubbish collection and it's instancing it, all of it, all those objects at each point, or each point on this plane, right, that we've created. And we don't want that. We want it to pick randomly from the list of everything that's in this collection. So all we're going to do is come over here to pick instance, and we can turn that on. And now it's going to randomly pick an instance from that collection list that we're feeding it, applying these parameters to it, and that'll work. So now if we increase our density, you can see we can change our seed, and it's going to randomly roll the different types of rubbish. So looking good. Now what we need to do is we need to randomize the rotation of these things, because we can't have them all laying perfectly in the same pattern. They need to have crazy rotations kind of all over the place. So let's go ahead and add that now. Great reminder, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Let's see if we can hit 28,500 today. Think we can do it? Okay, so now what we need to do is randomly rotate these things. We need to create new rotations for everything so that it doesn't look so organized. It needs to be chaotic. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a random value for our rotation right here for our instances. So I'm going to go Shift A, and I'm going to type in random. And there you see random value. I'll drop that here. We don't want a float. A float is a floating point number. So that's a number with a decimal and trailing zeros. We want a vector, which is a set of 3 numbers, right? So it could be a set of more than 3 numbers, but in Blender land here, vectors are 3 number sets. All right, so we can stick with this 0 to 1 minimum maximum for now. That's fine. And we're going to plug in the value into the rotation. You can see instantly it just works, which is really cool. But let's talk about why it's working. Why would it be a different rotation for every single piece of geometry? Well, the reason is, you see this dotted line. This is telling us something. This is telling us that what Blender is doing here is it's running through this spreadsheet. And this means it's basically performing a loop, right, between all of these different points. So it goes through every single point, and it will generate a random value, random vector between 0 and 1 for the X, Y, and Z for the 0, 1, and 2 field. And it will apply it to the rotation of each point. So each point means all of these in our spreadsheet. If you come down to the instances, you can see all of them. And we'll go through every single one of them, generate a random number, and plug it in here to these values. And it'll do it again, it'll do it again. Whereas the solid line means it's not going to do a loop. It just does one thing. So it just takes this collection and it sends it over to here once. Now this thing has that collection. There's no need to cycle through and loop through anything because it's like, it has all the info it needs. Whereas in this case, we need it to cycle through everything and go through it. So that's what the dotted line means in the new geometry node system. It's basically, picture it like a loop where it's going to go through everything and apply this system that you've created to it, okay? Or change values in a certain way. So that is how that works. Now we can adjust these a little bit. If we take like the minimum and maximum, we can like turn down some of these if we don't want it to be quite so crazy. Like, maybe we want, let's have a look. What's going to look good? We can turn this one right up because like that rotation looks good. This one I want to be a little careful of because it doesn't look quite good. So I might turn this one just so it's up just a little bit. I'm holding down Shift and dragging, and that allows me to just do a more fine motor adjustment or a fine number tuning. You can move them slower. And this one as well. We don't want to go too nuts on. So I'll just keep these guys a bit lower. And there we go. That looks pretty good. Now, one thing that we've done as well is that in our collection itself, we've taken, just grab all these guys, pull them up here so you can see. I've just duplicated a few objects like this one here. And so just Shift D, duplicate it. And now it will continue, now it'll be a part of this whole simulation. And then rotated it in a different way. Now, what's important with this is we take these now and we can delete that one. We'll take these guys and we want to apply, make sure that rotation is applied, okay? Because if you don't apply that rotation, it won't apply through here because we're using this reset children node, which will reset that value. So if I take this Shift D to duplicate, grab Y, and then rotate on the Y and rotate on the Z, and let's like do something like this, right? You can see nothing's changing, right? But if I come here and I go F3, apply rotation, suddenly you're going to notice something pop down here, and that's because we're generating one more of these things, and it's not resetting anything, except for its position. We don't want to keep this position. We want it to just zero out the position. And now you've got one more that's a little bit crazy. And the reason why I've done that is because it just means that I've got a little more control over these guys. Like I don't want things to be, like I don't want the barrel thing to ever be like this, because that doesn't look quite right. I just want it to be like that or like that. So that's why I've done those. And we've only got this rotation really maxing out on the final one, the Z rotation, to give us that nice chaotic mix. So we can turn off the rubbish. Now what we can do is we can take this plane and we can actually add some more geometry to it and change its shape. So we can get these piles if we want to. Now this system is what we're going to really use as we've got it here. But just to demonstrate, if I go into edit mode, I can hit F3, subdivide, and I can open up the subdivide dropdown and just increase the number of subdivisions like this. I'll also switch them to wireframe mode, or actually instead of wireframe mode, what I'll do is I will come over to the nodes and I will just hide the geometry node system. And I'll just grab one of these. Actually, I'll just subdivide one more time. So I've got an even number. I can actually grab a center vertex. And I'm going to turn on proportional editing. And I'll go G to grab and Z to lock it on the Z. And then I'll roll my mouse wheel and you can see that circle starts to expand. Now yours might be, for some reason, might be bigger than your screen, in which case you move it around, it's going to look like this. So just roll your mouse wheel down until you start to see that circle. So there we go. So I'm going to create this little pile like that. And now I can turn this back on. You can see we've got this thing all working really nicely, piling up on top. Now, a couple of things. We want to see this plane actually through this surface, right? Because we want to be able to, we don't want to see through this, right? So I want to keep the plane. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to grab a join geometry node and I'll drop it here and I'll take this input, this output, I'll stick it right here. That will take the original plane and join it up with everything else that we've just made. Also right click and shade smooth, and I can increase my density as well, just to make sure I'm kind of covering it nicely. And now that looks really good. I don't feel like I need to do any other kind of rotation on these guys. I feel like that's really solid. The other thing would be to take this plane and apply the rusted metal material that we've created for these guys. And that will help to unify the whole thing. So you can't really see, if you're looking through and you see through it, it doesn't really stand out. You can see that's the plane there, but it hides really nicely. So now we've got this really cool pile of rubbish. I'm going to name this collection rubbish. I'm going to make some pipes first, I think. So I'm going to create a Bezier curve and I'll go into edit mode. Take this point and I'll rotate on the Z. I'll turn on the screencast keys so you guys can see. And I'm going to grab this on the Y, bring it down, and I'll just rotate it a little bit just by eye. Because this is rubbish, none of this stuff is going to matter too much. So there we go, just a curve. And then what I can do with this is I come here and I can go to geometry and then we can extrude. No, is it? No. Depth. That's what we want. And then what we can do is convert this to mesh. So F3, convert to mesh. It was just the first option that popped up there. So you can see now it's a mesh object. And now what I can do is I can hold down Alt and select this loop. And I can hit E to extrude. I can scale, E, grab X, like that. E, scale. And how do I want this to work? I might go like that, E, and grab X, and bring it in like that. Should be good. So we don't have to go all the way with it. And then I'll do the same thing, but instead of like remodeling all that, what I can do, I still have that one loop selected inside there. I can hit Control plus, boop, 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 like that, grab all of those, and then hit Shift D to duplicate. Now what I can do is I can hit G and Shift Z. You can see I've got this separate section. We're still in edit mode, so this is all part of the same object. can rotate this 80. And then I can grab this on the X. And I can just slide it right in here. And grab it on the Y and bring that right up there. And it looks like it's pretty close. It's shade smooth at the moment. So it's got the weird, like, you can't see the edges. So we can just come here to normals and click auto smooth. And then we can also change the angle up to like maybe 45. And that will shade all these smooth, but keep these sharp because these are greater than 45 degrees. That's how that works. Now, because it's rubbish, I wonder if we should like have it, like, should we take this and turn on proportional editing, grab a section, turn on transparent mode, grab a section and like bend things, like, yeah, it's pretty cool. First piece of rubbish, grab Y. So we're going to go mesh plane, scale it up a little bit. All right, I'm going to hit Control R to go for a loop cut. And I'll roll my mouse wheel. I'm going to hit Escape and open up a little pop-up menu. Yeah, 10 should work. What you can do is, cool, watch this. Select these edges. Actually, I'll deselect everything. And I'll just box select right down the middle there, right? So go to these edges. What I want to do is I'm going to like kind of create this sawtooth up and down pattern. So I don't want every single one of these selected. So I can come up here to select and I can go to, where is it? Checker deselect right there. And see how it deselects every other one? It's a very cool feature. Now I can do is I can grab, turn on proportional editing. I can grab Z, bring that up. Now I've got some corrugated metal, but we want to make some dents into this. So I'm going to roll my mouse wheel, create some loop cuts, go to vertex mode, just grab a random vertex and grab with proportional editing. Just kind of distort this a little bit. I'm going to right click shade smooth. All right, so you see what I did there? I used the shade smooth trick again. So I right clicked, did shade smooth, and then I turned on auto smooth. And I brought my edges down, the degrees down until it looked good, basically. So I get sharp on these, but everything else is like, the angle's small enough that it's going to shade it smooth. So that looks pretty good. All right, let's make something else. Let's grab these guys. Actually, yeah, let's go ahead and do that material, the rust material. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on EV, render view up there. I'll create a light so we can see a little bit better. I'll go for a sunlight. And I'll just rotate it a little bit, and I'll shift D to duplicate, and I'll rotate this one around. And I'm going to put the same material on both of these guys, and I'll call this rust. All right, let's create a Musgrave. And we're going to plug this first into the emission so we can see it really clearly. And we're also going to grab, let's just take the dimension down and the detail up. I'm going to use this to create our rust. I might just leave it like that for now. Let me grab a color ramp, drop that here. You can see how it changed, by the way. I went to that light gray. It's because color ramp always clamps stuff. And this Musgrave texture was creating stuff that was like way beyond 0 and way beyond 1, whereas the color ramp will clamp it down to 1 and 0. So that's why it kind of lost in that look. Sometimes a better way of dealing with the Musgrave texture is to use a map range node, because that can handle values beyond 0 and 1. If you turn off clamp, see, this should look pretty much the same as the color ramp, but if we turn off clamp, it won't, because it's going to spread back out into the same sort of ratio that was in before. That ratio, that's a really bad way of describing it. But anyways, but now we can control the fall off and stuff a bit easier without losing all that nice detail. We use this for the rust. All right, so let's create just like a straight up metal material. So I'm going to come up here to base color, and actually I'll turn metallic all the way up first. I'll turn spec up a bit, and I'll turn roughness down a little bit. Since this nice kind of like steel look. And then what we can do is we can take this and we can go for a bump, and we'll stick this map range node into the height. It's going to look at the white values and make them high bumps, like high bits of geometry, and the dark values would be low bits. And then we can take the distance down to like 0.1 maybe, and the strength down as well. It's quite uniform. So I feel like, excuse me, losing my voice. Let's go for a color ramp. Drop it down. Let's use this to clamp it. So we're affecting it with this first, and then we're going to clamp it with this. So you can see we get this like these little clumps, and it looks like rust. But it's not changing like the roughness or anything. So it's a bit too uniform. So we need to use this system to affect this. So what we can do is we can pick like what our base roughness needs to be for these materials. I think something like this probably looks good. So like we can just go 0.5. To be honest, I think it looks good. So I can grab a color ramp here, and I can say, all right, I want let's see, what does it look like? Which one's white? Which one's black? Okay, so those bits are white. So the black bit, I'm going to make 0.5. So I can just take the RGB values. If you hold down Shift or not hold down Shift, if you click on the top one and drag down, it'll select all of them. And you can type something, and it'll type it across all of them. You can also just go into the HSV tab here and change the V value, which is for stands for value, and that'll change all of them uniformly. So I can plug this into here, and now we can decide what's these little rough bits. We don't want them to be reflective at all, so we can keep that at white. That's fine. And I'll plug this into the roughness. That'll make a different roughness for down here and up here. So now you can see that it's like shiny on one bit, but not the other. Now we can also change the color for these as well. So I'll just duplicate this color ramp, plug this one up here. So again, let's decide what do we want the metal to look like. Well, right now we're going for a white color. I might make that more of a gray, I think. And then the rust, we could make like a red, a brownish red, like this. Might make one more color, maybe a brighter rust color. And then I might make this one, take the saturation off on this. That kind of a color there. So we can plug this in, and it'll take this range of colors and apply it. And then we can adjust these sliders to figure out how far we want this to go. And this colors aren't quite right, but we'll fix that rust color right. And then we can come back, because all these are reading from the same system, we can now adjust this one to get it to be just the way we want it. So we can let that rust expand, contract based on where we move the 2 max and 2 min values. Another thing we could do is, instead of letting it, so right now it's like just sort of a blanket noise pattern, right, across the whole thing. Sometimes it's nice to kind of create even more variation, so you can't tell that it's just this Musgrave noise pattern that's kind of just thrown across everything indiscriminately, right? So what we can do is take these guys, just move this over here. So we can create one more system to kind of cut away sections of this rust. So I can take this one here, and I could grab like a noise texture, drop that down, and then we could use this. So I'll plug this into the emission so we can see it. Yep. And I'll grab a color ramp. All right. So let's take the scale down. And so what we're going to use is basically wherever these white bits are, we're going to use that to cut away sections of rust. So I'm going to bring these together, just make them really strong. It's pretty good. I might turn the detail up, turn the roughness up though. So this is going to create little gaps. So what we can do now is we can take this and we can decide do we want to get rid of the white stuff or the stuff here that's in the black area. I think I'll get rid of the black area. So I'll unplug this from the emission. And what we can do is we can do a simple mix RGB. We could also do a math. I'll take this value and I will multiply them together. And I'll plug that into here, and you'll see it'll get rid of wherever we had black, because if you multiply anything by the number 0, you get 0. So it just cuts it out. That would be exactly the same as using the mix RGB node. You could do the same thing here, even though this is looking for colors, which is a set of 3 numbers. If we set this to multiply and plug these in, we'll get the same result. But we don't need to, because we could just do it with the math node. Let's turn up our sun lamp. Other one, that nice rim light. You could also take this and Shift D, grab Z, put this one there, scale that up. Shift D, grab Z, put that one over there, rotate a little bit. Shift D, grab Z, put one way out here, scale that up. And then what we can do, we can come over to the shader editor, right? Bam. then we can go world, and then we can come here and we can go volume scatter. And we can plug this in, and then we can take the density down to 0.01 and the anisotropy. Just play with that a little bit, give it a bit of a color. Maybe put a bit of color into these lights. Thanks so much for watching this tutorial. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Leave me a comment as well. Let me know what you'd like to see in future tutorials. And don't forget to check out the Patreon or join on YouTube where you can get all of the uncut live streams that I've done. That's tons of extra content that I cut out of these tutorials. So if you'd like to check that out, go have a look. Thanks so much for watching. I will catch you in the next tutorial. See you later. Bye.